Hey, folks, welcome to a show. Happy Thursday. Happy freedom for the stock market day. I don't know. Things are kind of, it looks like they're turning around at least a little bit financially, thanks to Trump pausing the tariffs, which he didn't really pause them. He still got the ridiculous 125 tariffs, import duties on us for purchasing Chinese stuff. And then the 10% import duties, those are the same thing as tariffs, charged to us on things from all those other countries. The only thing that went away, other than the 10% minimum, were those extra special calculations based on that, showboating globetrotter algebra or whatever they used to try to calculate what a tariff was. If anybody catches that reference. The news has not been great, and even with everything else going on, I'm still skeptical. The fact that Trump is saying, like, well, we're pausing tariffs. No, you're not. You still impose 10% across all of them. You're still essentially embargoing goods from China, which is a ridiculous thing since we basically had a hand in setting up China into being the, mass production powerhouse that it is. I mean, a lot of this kind of smacks of the way we were, the same kind of jitters we had about Japan, but from a different angle. And so other people are weighing in on this too, and there's a lot of post-mortem stuff going on. And what's Trump's real plan? Is he playing chess, not checkers, or checkers, not chess? Is he just a pigeon in the park pooping on as many boards as he can find? I think it's probably that one. I think that Trump, from his first term until now, has been surrounded by a lot of lunatics and ghouls that are always giving him some of their pet theories, whether it's their own or borrowed, and all that stuff has kind of gotten glommed up and stuck together in his brain. And I think I was talking about this my last hangout with Fabio and Maya. And when he tries to express any of this stuff, it kind of comes out just completely gobbled up. But then on top of that, what's been interesting to watch is not his reaction, because, well, we had him as president before. We know his reactions. It's been watching the reactions of well-wishers for him, some of his fans, or people like, up in the corner here, Doug, who voted for him. But Doug's, he's too cool for, getting involved in any of the emotions of it, which makes me wonder, like, he wouldn't have to play defense on some of these actions from a President Kamala Harris, because I don't think that this would have happened. A stock market correction probably definitely would have happened. They do happen in business cycles, but not just one crash, but multiple. Trump said that if she were to be elected, we would get a 1929 style crash. Or if Biden did before he stepped down, we would get a 1929 style crash. We were kind of getting a little bit close to that. It looked like, or at least it felt like it. I mean, it was getting pretty weird. Indices were going in really odd ways, and then he decided to just slam on the brakes after he promised he would not do that. He would definitely not. No renegotiations. Tariffs are permanent. So, interesting. They're not permanent. I mean, like the base levels seem to be. He's leaving those on there. So maybe this is what he'll do. He'll shock the system and then wind it back. And so all he wanted was the 10% across the board, and then effectively a trade embargo on China, but at least an embargo on us purchasing their products. So, yeah. Scott Duke is here. He said he's listening while he prepares dinner. Good to see you, Scott. Who else is here? Amy is here. Good evening, Amy. Good to see you. Lord Britfink's here. Good to see you. Money? You mean that crusty green fire kindling? Good to see you, Darth Bonson. Yeah, it's just paper. And we're going to watch a little bit of that here. One of the things, I'm also going to get into a little conversation about, because I think he gets into this a little bit. It's Trump's third term. This is only 18 hours old, this hangout that Doug had. So this must have happened yesterday. So let's take a look and see what's going on with it. Let's flip some things around here. Let's move me over. All right. Let's see what's going on. Tariff talk, a little bit of tariff talk, plus, reactions from the market, that kind of thing. Doug's live stream yesterday, which for some odd reason he didn't have his green screen going. Maybe this isn't the first time he hasn't had a green screen? Maybe that is his thing for his green screen. He's just not turning it on. Maya is driving and listening. Good to see you. Oh, listening. Okay, here we go.
Remember, you haven't lost if you don't sell. It's just paper. It's just on paper.
Yeah, it's just on paper. It's not real. Money's not real, man. It's more of a vibe economy.
This is another thing that bothers me when people say, oh, it hurts retirees. It only hurts retirees if the stock market goes down, if they have to sell. Most retirees live off the dividends. So the real question is,
yeah, at that point. But here's the problem with this. I'm gonna bring this up right now because I think this is completely hypocritical. When the market does extremely well, you and I don't do much better, especially if we're just invested in a 401k or an index fund or something conservative. And usually we're encouraged to do exactly that, right? That seems to be the real trick. Be conservative, be conscientious with your money, be consistent, be patient, and just keep plugging away. Now, when the market has a crash, everybody suffers. I know individuals that lost anywhere from $3,000 approximately to over $40,000 in their 401ks. These are not wealthy people, and they're probably never going to be. And that's not, unlike Doug, that is not me impugning their character. So I think the double standard is really, really interesting. Expect slow, steady gains. That's the best you can hope for. And when the market takes a chunk right out of the side of you, we'll walk it off and hope that those slow, consistent, steady gains will eventually catch back up. This is fascinating math, but it is a little bit difficult to take, especially if it's kind of, it's one of those things where it's trickle down advice, and the trickle is, I think, a faint yellow color. It's a golden trickle, if you will.
Will the dividends drop? And nobody knows the answer to that. Depends on the economy. But anyhow,
well, the dividends drop. Well, with some of the crashing that was going on over the last, week, who's to say whether or not any of those 401k or any of those dividend, the money that these retirees are living off of in terms of dividend payout weren't vulnerable. They were vulnerable back during the big Lehman shock crash. So. And even he's saying, oh, I don't know. All right. So what advice are you giving? But they didn't do anything. They lost money in an account that they were told to invest in, and they did it. And then a president came along and decided the United States needed to beat China at its economic model yesterday. And he called it everything from, it's a revolution. We're changing that. We're cleaning it up. We're cleaning it out. We're going to be even bigger, be even better, even stronger than before. And only the weak will fail. Well, there's a lot of weak people in the United States. So I guess we just have to scrape them off because we'll be better off kind of mentality.
I thought I would listen to a billionaire, and I purposely made the title of this live stream because they're smarter than the rest of us, just to trigger some people.
I don't know why he would do that to trigger some people. I think it's kind of funny that it has no effect on Doug, right? I'm reasonably certain that Doug thinks that he's better than everyone, including billionaires. Doug thinks he's owed their money deep down in that dark little heart of his.
Let's see. This is Andrew Schultz, the guy with the mustache. He's hilarious. I love him. And I'll let him introduce this billionaire.
Hello, everybody. The stock market is nosediving faster than Conor McGregor at a Colombian cookout. People are concerned, anxious, terrified. So we've asked someone to come on the podcast to calm your nerves, put you at ease. No.
I don't watch Andrew Schultz. This is actually the longest I've watched any of his stuff. I'm not impressed so far. That was pretty cringy.
No, not her. We've asked our richest friend, Chamath Pineapple Porta Potty Platypus.
I'm going to try to say his real name. Chamath Palihapitiya. Yeah, that's why he's called him a platypus.
That's why I called him. His name's hard.
former owner of the Warriors, one of the earliest hires at Facebook, a legit billionaire, and the host of the biggest business podcast in the world, All In, if he would take some time away from surfing on the top of a train to explain why the stock market looks like Saxon Ratliff the morning after a sibling stroke-off. We're going to find out the real end game for Trump's tariffs, what happens if they don't work, and why we might already be in a recession.
Okay, so that's the intro. Let me give you my take on the tariffs. I like them. But
Why?
Doug, they're attacks on the American consumer. I can say okay to that. I am actually.
Doug has no problem attacking the American consumer. What's interesting is that shoplifting, he mentioned, was an attack on the American consumer that he could not abide. He thought that in comparison to what Donald Trump was convicted for, the 34 business fraud felonies, in comparison to that, what shoplifters do, and there's footage, and he made like a little video and footage of people stealing handbags and stuff like that out of a store. Ooh, that really gets his goat. Okay. So you have two sets of consumers in that situation. One, the person stealing the handbag because they've decided to go from consumer to thief. But the other person involved, the other party involved, is the little business that is. And in Doug's case, I think he mentioned mom and pop shops. They are also consumers. So tariffs are an assault on them. And now Doug is okay with assaults on consumers. Interesting. We'll see where he's going to go next.
Actually for consumption taxes over income taxes. So the plan, I think, is if income taxes drop, I rather pay taxes on what I consume, not what I earn. That promotes saving. And when you're...
He would because he's wealthy. Of course he would. The issue isn't about a person's preference, because a wealthy person, of course, is going to prefer, if they're trying to hoard as much wealth as possible, the most regressive tax. If you're taxing, say you do one of the Forbes things, it's just a 10% flat tax across everything, which is essentially what we're kind of getting with the import duty, the tariff imposed on all these goods coming from these other countries. That's not money that Trump is charging those other countries, even though he keeps using language like that. He's charging that to you and to me. We have to pay that in one way or the other. Now, as individual consumers, the price and that may not be passed down to us. But if you are a U.S. firm, a business interest, and you rely on ordering some of those parts or components or products from those countries, maybe even to augment or finish the product that you're making here, then you are now being taxed for that. So this is an attack not only on consumers, but consumers who produce finished goods to then be consumed at a different level. So yeah, when it's not surprising to me that he says, I know that somebody like Pine Creek would favor a consumption-based tax like import duties, because they favor wealthy capitalists, and they end up disproportionately affecting. They're also not very efficient, because what they rely on is they're going to tax people who directly consume. So the people with the least purchasing power are going to feel it hardest and feel it first and react the most quickly, which means they're going to cut down their spending as much as they can, right? They're going to try to save any way that they can, which will also drag down the economy, right? But any of those kind of bourgeois producers that are going to want to produce those goods are now looking at higher costs to bring in the raw materials from places they can't get them domestically in order to finish their products, in order to continue to make their sales. So even though they're making a domestic product, because they're importing some of their components, their prices go up. And the people that feel that the fastest are the people at the bottom first.
When you promote saving in a society, then you're not as dependent on the government. When you're not as dependent on the government, then the government can't manipulate you as easily, because...
But it's not tariffs are not a mechanism to encourage people to save. This is incorrect. You do not impose tariffs to encourage sections of the population to save their money. You usually use a combination of tariffs and direct investment, maybe just direct federal or state, or maybe combined with private investment, to encourage or to incubate a particular industry. You don't just pass that tax to force people to save their cash as an import duty. That doesn't make any sense. What you could do if you wanted to do that, what he's talking about, could be accomplished with a national sales tax, which is also a remarkably stupid idea, and one that would affect the working class, the working poor, the middle class, the upper middle class, and then as the wealthier you get, the less it seems to affect you. So not only that, the carve-outs on some of those federal sales taxes, national sales taxes, are hilarious.
They can't say, well, I'll give you this, I'll give you that if you vote for me. You say, hey, I got like X amount in the bank. I'm fine. You can't pressure me.
Who does he think is trying to buy votes? Because Elon Musk was just doing that in Wisconsin.
I mean, consumption taxes, I think, are the way to go. Canada has a consumption tax, a GST, but the problem is they also have high income taxes. So that's a double whammy. Okay, so here they talk.
Yeah, well, we have that too because we have consumption taxes at the state level. We could get away from state taxes if we just kind of coordinated all that stuff with federal taxing, but we don't do that. We have kind of an inefficient system there. Leo writes, are we really surprised that Doug doesn't care? I mean, the guy clearly lacks empathy. I mean, he goes as far as to ridicule with his characterizing it as a feel sorry for-ism. Yeah, he doesn't really care. I think I missed Michael, the Canadian atheist. I think he's here. Anyway. Oh, yes, mobile and tuning in. Good to see you, Michael. And Jason. So in Trump's first term, I never got better health insurance and paid more in taxes at the end of the year. This time I still have expensive eggs in my lawn and lost almost $3,500 of value in my 401k. Yeah. I just want to remind everyone, for those keeping track at home, Donald Trump has been president for around 80 days. He hasn't even made it through his 100 days yet. And this is the crap that we're dealing with. Almost everything that he said, the worst stuff that would happen if he didn't win, and Harris got it or Biden got it, a lot of those things have happened. One of the things I think he predicted was that, the government would be carried away by immigrant workers, which, none of them are coming across the border anymore, which is, I like how they're saying, they're like, well, this is great. Yeah, unless you talk to farmers in Nebraska.
About the stock market dropped about 15%.
We lost $6.4 trillion, I think, essentially, thanks to Donald Trump having a little bit of whatever, what do you call that, a mild ischemia. Kent Hovind, hello, Jefferson, hello, Jay. Are we doomed or can anything save us now? I don't think we're doomed, but things are not looking good. I think demonstrably the president that we're dealing with is insane. Or so stupid that he might as well be. Article 25, as far as I'm concerned, is way overdue for this guy. He's ready for a home. If you've watched anything, I watched a little bit of live coverage of one of his cabinet meetings, and it was just a slobber fest. Everybody just, thanks to your leadership, President Trump. Thanks to your guidance. Thanks to your wisdom. I was like, what? Do every one of you need to take the knee like this deeply? Every one of them wearing thick, knee pads, built for endurance, long time. Just
from its recent highs to its recent lows, and then today it went up 10%, I think. No, 9%, because Trump said we'll put a 90-day pause on all tariffs except for the 10% basement. And except for China, we're going to hose. We're going to cause them much pain and suffering. And
doesn't really it causes them some issues, but it really causes us more issues because we're an import economy still, and we get a lot of stuff from them still. Not just they somebody like Doug, I think, really wants to leave this at okay, so you can't buy your Crocs or you can't buy a new pair of shoes for as cheap as you once could. That's not the case. It's people that make stuff here that can't get their hands on equipment, tools, raw materials, those kinds of things. Despite what's existing in Donald Trump's fevered, imagination, we don't have everything here and we don't make everything here, and we can't. We can make a lot. I think he will be impeached after 2 years. Yeah, I think he will too.
I like
Not
that
that
about
necessarily makes a
Trump
difference,
and the
but-
tariffs. And so the tariffs, giving my view of the tariffs, besides it being a consumption tax, if it's a low percentage, like 10%, it basically still allows the importers to import goods from other nations, and those goods still be competitive if it's only 10%. They're still in the market.
Yeah, they're still in the market, but it's just a consumption tax. And it does have, when you have it across all those different fields, it does have it can have a cumulative effect in certain ways. It depends on how it's drafted. Also, it depends on its necessity. Again, it's not a 10% charge on the country. It's a 10% charge on you and me. Doug gets this because he said, oh, it's a consumption tax. Yeah. So it is going to have, and Doug's all for it because he thinks, oh, well, if these are in place, then people will save. Where? Where will they save? How will they save? Will they start making their own clothes? Will they start growing their own food? More people, I think, rent than own. So do they have the land to grow food? And if they can grow food, what kind of food can they grow? Pickling, I predict that, pickling will become a big thing. And dry curing.
And then you are collecting taxes from the importer first, and then if they pass that on, which they probably will, to the consumer, then the consumer will pay it. And I'm fine with that. Totally fine with that. But with what Trump's doing now with...
Sure, except he does business valuations. That's his job. He said that. So I'd be kind of curious. I'm like, all right, Doug, well, if you do business valuations, what are some of your clients saying about these tariffs? Because now, if they're service providers, this is a big issue. The service industry in the United States, the deficit kind of goes in the other way. When it comes to like getting products and manufactured goods and things like that, America is a consumer. We buy from a lot of places. But in terms of services, education, healthcare, financial services, entertainment products, tourism, all these kinds of service industries, it's flip-flop the other way. There's a big counterbalance in that direction. So I would be kind of curious to see, like, okay, if he's doing business valuations for, say, small financial firms, things like that, maybe they're not going to feel it. Other than the fact that, like, the cost of printer toner goes up or something like that, or a ream of printer paper.
The huge tariffs with China, that basically just says, we're not trading with you. Once your tariffs get to like over 100%, it's Trump saying, we're not going to trade with you. Bye-bye. And Trump's
But he could have done that before.
okay with that.
But this doesn't make any sense. A lot of the explanation that's happening right now is listening to these guys say, well, this really got these countries' attention, and now they're gonna come to the table and negotiate with the president of the United States. You don't think that if the president of the United States wanted to renegotiate a trade deal with, say, Zimbabwe, he couldn't have gotten a representative on the phone? He had to lump them in with a group of 60 plus countries with just an announcement of blanket tariffs. And in their case, I think it was higher than 10%. So none of this is tracking. And Doug is just sort of flowing along. Well, I'm all for it because tariffs are a consumption tax and those encourage savings. Cool. That's not why your boy wants them.
Most of the goods coming out of China, not most, a lot of the goods coming out of China are useless things above poor quality that we don't need to buy anyhow. And
no, that's not true. I'm going to let him talk for a minute.
There's exceptions, of course. What other thoughts do I have on the tariffs?
They're mostly that, but there's exceptions, of course. I've explained this before. I'm going to do it again. This is going to bore the shit out of most of you. I play guitar a fraction of the time. I broke my hand a few years ago, so I haven't played much or consistently in years, but I do like guitars, like a lot of white dudes do. The guitar that I've got sitting right over there in the corner is actually a Squier Stratocaster, a bullet Stratocaster, which means it's even cheaper than a normal one, right? The Squiers are built out of a variety of manufactured locations, and most of them are not great. However, because of a weird thing that happened many, many years ago, there started to become this thing back in the 80s. Fender handmade most of their guitars. And if you got a Fender, you were a rock and roller. Well, they started manufacturing, mass manufacturing a certain line of guitars. And the place they went to get that manufacturing done, Japan. And Japan started making a lower grade, mass manufactured line of them. The Japanese typically have a good handle on how to manufacturing quality control. And pretty soon, at some point, the quality of the mass-produced Japanese models was equal to, and sometimes better than, the boutique handmade ones you got out of, the United States. So it ended up becoming kind of this little well-known secret that if you could get your hands on a Japanese one, you save a lot of money and you had an even better device. The one thing that Fender would do is they might not have access to the best electronics or anything like that. That didn't matter. You get yourself a Japanese one, and then you customize it later. Still costs you less, and you got a better made guitar. Fender started to scale this process down. They moved their operations, I think, next to South Korea. The same process started over again. South Korean manufacturing crept up, got a little too close. They moved it again. So they've had manufacturing in a variety of different locations. This particular one, the one behind me, was manufactured in Indonesia. And Indonesia, at one point, was one of the least expensive places where you could manufacture these things. In fact, right now, I think it still probably is. But they've gotten so good at it that that guitar behind me, other than having some lackluster electronics or electric components in it, is a much better Fender guitar than I could have gotten from. I mean, it depends on your range, but I paid $90 for that thing, and I've played $700 guitars that were lower quality. So that's kind of the trick behind this. The idea that they're talking about, like, oh, these countries only sell cheap crap. No. After a certain point in time, they manufacture a lot of this stuff. They get better at manufacturing this stuff. And then they start to branch out. It used to be if it was made in Japan, it was cheap as hell. And then if it was made in Japan, you were willing to pay a premium to get it from there. And it didn't take very long. What, a generation and a half? So this is just more of the same kind of short-sighted ignorance I expect from conservatives, fascists.
Yeah, that's about it. The goal is make the tariffs high enough for China and other countries where we have a major trade deficit, and have Americans build and manufacture stuff themselves.
All of it or just some of it?
The analogy I give is United States is like the richest neighbor on the block. And
providing
over
services.
The past few decades, we've been hiring the poorer neighbors to paint our fences, to mow our lawns, to repair our roof. But the rich daddy of this in this neighborhood has said, "Hey, I got lots of kids. Why am I paying my neighbors to do all this stuff? I'm going to get my kids to do it. I'm going to get my kids to mow the lawn. I'm going to get my kids to fix the roof. I'm going to get my kids to paint the house."
What?
And that causes the neighbors to go, "Oh, but we need your business."
Are you going to provide your kids with an allowance or pay them for it? It sounds like that's just a shift. This is a terrible analogy. Like, I'm going to make my kid mow my lawn for me for free. He gets room and board out of it or something like that. Look, the problem with this isn't that there's not anything essentially, wrong with the idea of just shifting the focus of where you're going to get this, but this is not the way that it works. The U.S. deindustrialized because most of its economy shifted to services, and the industrializing parts of it shifted to Asia, parts of Europe. And now it looks like they're shifting in part to places like India, parts of Africa. The United States could do this kind of stuff, but if you've got an economy set up where your currency is dominant and it's strong versus all of them, you essentially have an import economy. It's very easy for you to buy cheaper manufactured stuff from countries that have lower labor costs than it is to buy them from ones that are at your peer or higher. This just makes economic sense. If you're in terms of shopping, if I can get the same thing or even better quality for a much reduced price, I'm going to go with that one. That's essentially what the United States put itself in the position of doing. In the meantime, the economy has shifted over to where we're the world's lawyers and bankers and doctors and educators and entertainers, et cetera, that service stuff. It became a service-based economy. And that shift is massive, mostly because I don't even think it was really entirely guided. But this idea that like, well, what we need to do is get these manufacturing jobs back. Why? If you want to get a lot of people in America working, I'm all for that, especially if they're underemployed or they're having trouble finding a fit in the economy. You want to diversify the economy even more, and you want to get into something else like, I don't know, some kind of combination of service automation and some kind of manufacturing or high-end manufacturing. Yeah, let's do it. But let's direct invest in that, not impose tariffs on our own citizens to prevent them from buying products from other countries, and then hope the market sorts it out. And then, and then these opportunities will just sort of organically materialize beneath our feet. I don't believe that's going to happen, especially given how sophisticated China's economy is.
You're mean. You're a bully because you're not taking our services and our goods and say, hey, we can do it ourselves.
But that's exactly what Trump is arguing. Trump is arguing that we've been bullied. I don't understand why he's saying this. Trump's saying that we're the victim, even though we crafted the modern economy for the most part in a way that puts us in a position of primacy. He's saying that we're the ones being plundered and pillaged. We're the ones being taken advantage of. And he's like, so they're going to say that? Like, no, Trump is saying that. As the figurehead of America, he's going out there and like, well, we have to do these tariffs because we've just been taken advantage of for so long.
Now, a lot of Americans think we can't do it ourselves, and even if we could, it would take 5 to 10 years. That could be true, but I don't think so.
Actually trying to do, right? Some people are like, they're tanking the market on purpose to get the debt yield down. Can you speak on this theory? I think Besant has been in a few interviews talking about it.
Yeah. So what are they talking about? So here's the thing. America owes people a lot of money. Okay.
Oh, no, not the deficit myth. Oh, my God. This is going to be the whole thing. We have to pay so much money on the deficit. We don't have money to pay for anything else. So
we owe, oh my gosh, I want to say
36 trillion,
maybe $35 trillion to other people. Now, it's important to understand who are those other people and why did that happen?
Yeah.
So let's just say the 5 of us are running America. We all go off into our own separate rooms and, we come back with a plan. And Andrew, you're like, I want to spend $1 billion on defense. And then, Mark says, I want to spend $1 billion on healthcare. And I say, I want to spend, $2 billion on Social Security or whatever. And we tally it all up, right? And we're like, okay, to run America is going to cost $10 billion. How are we going to get that money? And,
I was raised in the Mennonite church, and the way the Mennonite church did it, okay, this is our expenses. How are we going to get this money? You take the number of members. Here's our expenses divided by the number of members. That's fair. Now today, especially from the left's mind,
the fact that he's reverting back to his Mennonite upbringing to figure out economics, that is exactly what I would imagine he would do.
And what's fair is the rich pay more and the poor pay nothing.
It's like 1913.
It's a GoFundMe.
The answer is we're going to go to all the individuals in the United States to pay for it. By the way, just so you guys know, before 1913, okay, we had 120 odd years where all of that money, that $10 billion, whatever that number was at the time, it was all generated via tariffs. Okay, it was outside folks paying in to have the right to be in the United States. Then we would take that money and we would pay for healthcare, we would pay for Social Security, we would pay for military, we did all that stuff.
Tax.
Okay, so anyways, fine. So here we are. But you add up all the amount of taxes we raise, and it only is $8 billion. So what do? You go and you borrow from somebody who's willing to lend you $2 billion. right?
So just to clarify, like that borrowing doesn't necessarily mean a bank. People can buy bonds. They can buy these treasury bonds. And isn't that a similar thing?
So what happens is, okay, we're like, okay, shit, we need to come up with $2 billion. Where do we get it? So what happens is the United States Treasury is allowed by law to then go into the market. Okay, I'll explain what that means in a second. And
I think he's getting this wrong, but
sell an IOU. Hey, this IOU is backed by the United States government.
I think he's describing, this is a very, very elementary description, I think, of a treasury, but a treasury bond.
Full faith and fidelity of all of the assets that we own. Give me $2 billion. I'm going to take it. I'm going to fund this deficit, and I'm going to spend my $10 billion this year.
Okay, it does do that, but it doesn't have to. So there's a lot of problems here with this. So, okay, the basic problem is that this is coming from the idea, essentially, this billionaire is approaching this like the government needs to budget like a household, and it doesn't. Households are users of money. Firms are users of money. Governments create money. So these guys believe that deficits are evidence of overspending. But that's not necessarily the case, because government deficits also mean usually, I would say probably in the majority of cases, private sector savings. If the government's running this stuff, running a deficit, putting more money into this, putting more money out than it's collecting in terms of revenue, which is the piggy bank mentality that this billionaire has, that means that money is circulating in the private sector. The private sector is saving. The same thing that Doug said he wanted more people to do. When they'll say this, they'll be like, well, the deficit is, we're passing this on to our kids and our grandkids. Future generations don't really absorb that debt. They don't really inherit that debt, because they're inheriting the real resources, the real assets that the nation has. So if they want to change their approach to it, they can. Another one: deficits drive up interest rates and crowd out private investment. This is classic econ, like 101, 102 kind of thinking. You'll get this in the Man-Q textbooks all the time. Deficits drive up the interest rates. They will crowd out private investment. That only happens if the Fed allows it, and the Fed controls those rates. So the deficits make us dependent on foreign creditors is one idea that these guys will have. And this is the China myth, right? That isn't as much of an issue as you think if the United States is the sovereign currency, if it's a sovereign currency user. So this isn't to say that, and this is part of like modern MMT kind of stuff, and this is part of this stuff is from like Stephanie Kelton's book on the deficit myth. But where this guy is going with it, this is very much undergrad econ kind of stuff that you have to kind of get past, because if you try to apply this to federal, to national economic and financial flows, it won't work. It looks like everything is doomed to fail. I would argue that most solutions, though, if you're approaching it with these mechanics, it will look like it's doomed to fail.
We've been doing that basically forever. Add it all up, now we're at 30 some odd trillion dollars. Okay. Now, what is the problem with that?
Well, what is the problem with that? You ask someone.
These guys think that the United States rang up a bill of $35 trillion in someone else's money on their credit card. And that money needs to be paid back. And that's, so either it amazes me when it comes to like basic savings and stuff, or like tax revenue, they talk about the country like it's a piggy bank. You can only start spending if you have this amount of revenue there. You couldn't possibly go out and spend any more than that. And then they're like, oh no, that's not the case. I mean, that should be how it works. It should live within its means. But if it can't, then it could always go out and deficit spend. But when it does that, it runs up this bill with all these other people, and it owes them stuff. Yeah, how does it pay that debt off? It pays that debt off in money it creates. So anytime these guys are talking about that, it doesn't mean that there's not real problems associated with this, that there can't be real problems, especially with inflation, that are associated with this kind of thing. But they're generally not the problems that these guys are talking about. Historically, they just haven't been. And anytime these guys have tried to chase these ghosts around, they end up screwing up the economy. I would point to anything that you can see about Clinton and his efforts at deficit reduction. Take a look at how that worked out.
On the left, and they can't answer that question. Some people say, well, there's no problem with debt. If you talk to the expert economists, they'll say there's nothing wrong with high debt. Oh, really? Well, Chamath here will tell you what's wrong with that.
Well, that is a colossal interest rate payment. Imagine that you take out now a credit card every year, max it out. At some point,
You're right, Peter. I forgot to switch it over.
You're going to have an enormous interest payment, right? And that is dictated by the interest rate that is tied to the credit card that you have.
It's not a credit card. He just said it. Federal debt is not a credit card. Put very simply, because you can't issue currency to pay off your credit card. It'd be great if you could, but you can't. Comparing the national debt to a credit card is fundamentally misguided.
It's the exact same thing for the United States government. We have 30 some odd trillion of debt, and we have a really high APR.
Yeah, the APR is what right now?
Well, I think the blended is, I want to say like 5-6%, let's say. So, you're talking trillions of dollars in interest, okay? Which is a problem. So on top of that,
I also want to say that I believe, anyone out there, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the ability to buy bonds, T-bills, which are essentially a piece of that debt action. And it pays off, right? And that's part of what's going on here. That's part of what's happening. So the government could default, right? That's really the concern. The government could default on this these interest payments. It's usually two concerns. One is that's the only thing that we have money for. Nope. Or we could default on it. Well, okay, if we default on a bond, you really think the bondholders, and a lot of them are in China, they're limited. Do you really think they want to see us go belly up on that if you own it? Like, I mean, the United States just decides, you know what, I could see Trump declaring that. Yeah, we don't owe anything anymore. I'm not paying that.
These credit cards, assuming you have...
This is probably the pillaging and plundering that Trump is talking about.
His credit card, it expires, and you got to go and apply for a new one. Mm-hmm. That's what so every year, so right now in this year...
Okay, I just want to show something here. This is the monthly Treasury report. Our fiscal year end is the end of September. September 30th of every year is the United States' fiscal year end. This is the budget. This is outlays, receipts, interest. That's 1 month. Let's do cumulative. So what is that, 8 months? Net interest, $396 billion. National defense, $399 billion. Remember, this is not a full year, but we're paying right now as much in interest as we are in national defense. That has to change.
America has $6 trillion of credit that is expiring that we don't have the money to pay for. So what do we need to do? We need to reborrow that money.
So issue more bonds.
So we have to sell bonds. So who are the buyers? The buyers are all these people around the world, central banks, pension plans.
Also us.
Yeah.
Yes, but asterisks. The thing that America, again, I go back to, like, we are the star of the show, okay? Everybody is levered to the United States. Everybody. What does that mean? If you go to Japan, Japan is way deeper in debt than we are. They have 2 times as much debt as we do relative to our GDP, relative to the amount of revenue that we make. And you would say, well, how is that possible? When Japan finances their debt,
because they're racist,
the overwhelming majority of the people that
well, both things can be true, but let's try to calm down there, cockatoo.
are supporting Japan are the Japanese. Japanese companies, Japanese pension funds, Japanese individuals, your mom, your dad, buying the Japanese bonds. In America, it's not that. It's about a third are Americans, but 2/3 are everywhere.
No,
Okay,
that's
it's
not
like
true.
I think yeah, I don't know about that.
Saudi Aramco, it's Shell, it's Novartis.
Wouldn't that diversify it and make it more robust, though? That's more. Now you've got international parties that do not want to see you go belly up on your debt.
It's the
China.
Central Bank of Lesotho. It's China. China owns almost $1 trillion of our debt.
Hang on.
So that chart doesn't include everything coming in as far as I could see. Yeah, it seemed incomplete. But anytime I see this explanation about like, oh, this is how much we're paying on the debt, and that's how debt works. That's our credit card. It's just it's like the stereotype of like the housewife or the house husband scold, the finance scold, like, oh, we got to pay down this debt. Like, do you? And generally speaking, if the government is going to do that, it's going to drag that cash out of the private sector. Now, Doug is all for that. Doug's like, yeah, do it. It'll force people to save. Like, no, if the government wants that, it has to do it in a way that it can encourage people to continue buying so they pay their consumption taxes, and working so they pay their income taxes, and buying homes and property so they pay their property taxes, so that income gets hoovered up and pays off that debt. But if the government wants to deleverage that, it's probably going to end up having to raise taxes in order to do it, one way or the other. And what Doug just said was, those taxes encourage savings because people will draw down their consumption, especially on consumption taxes. So how do you do that? Raise income taxes? Last time I heard, Doug was not for income taxes. So it's a pickle.
I think he misspoke there. He said it was 2/3 other people, 1/3 Americans that own the debt. I think it's the opposite. I think it's 2/3 Americans. What percent?
Yeah, actually, I think he might be right because I think it's required to be that way.
Percentage of the U.S. national debt is held by Americans. I think it's 64%. I don't know. Answer is 70 to 75%. Grok says.
It's almost 3/4.
Yeah.
So,
Grok.
So the whole point is,
But that means 25 to 30% is held outside the country, which is a bad thing. That's money flowing out of the country in interest payments.
if you can bring the cost of borrowing down, we save ourselves a lot of money. We make.
Serb says, people like Doug doesn't understand funding isn't linked to taxes, etc. Yeah, it really isn't.
The headache much smaller. Now, here's a huge problem that happened at the end of Biden.
Real quick, before you say that. So essentially, if we can lower the
APR,
if we can lower the interest payment, then at the end of every year, the money that we owe is much less, and then we can start chipping away at the principal instead of just paying the interest.
There you go.
Another important thing to understand is the more people buy treasuries, the lower the interest payment is on those treasuries.
I'm pretty sure that the United States could just pay it off by issuing the currency necessary to pay off the debt. The problem would be what that would do with international markets, what it would do to the relative value of the dollar, what it would do to inflation. But if you can pay something off by generating the currency it needs to be paid off with, you've got a lot of leverage.
Less people that are buying treasuries, the higher it goes, right?
Exactly. This is like this.
So if you can, some people say if you can scare people in the equities market, meaning just the stocks, right? If you can scare them about stocks, if you can create uncertainty in the stock market,
then they go buy treasuries.
People go, I just need some security. I need something back with the full, what is it?
Yeah, when a lot of people flood the market to buy bonds, to buy treasuries, you have more buyers.
Hey everyone, big heads up. Paleo Valley's running a sale on all their meat sticks right now. You can get 30 sticks for $36.
A net increase, virtually all economists agree.
Is he watching his own video? Well, that's boring. I'm not gonna. Then he's taking calls. I think I'm just gonna wrap it up here. He's watching ancient history. What's this?
All you have to do is click the link.
pandemic and is that
What's
who's
this $11 trillion loss you're talking about? Call in and let me know. Someone lost $11 trillion. They had it in their trunk
I
and
think
they
they're
lost
trying
the
to say
car
that
or
the
something?
country lost it.
What's this 11 trillion loss?
Yeah, this is really a boring stream. I regret watching this. Okay, so Doug is trying to get some financial advice, is trying to watch the financial and economic wisdom of Andrew Schultz and some random billionaire whose name Doug would rather make fun of than learn to pronounce correctly. So I guess with that, I'm just going to call it quits there. There was one other point I wanted to bring up. A little while ago, I had stumbled across his main chat because Doug has a Discord, and while they were on it, they were having a back and forth. They were talking about Trump's third term, and so I don't have the ability to really share this on the screen, but I did want to read this. So, a person says they wrote, "The best argument I heard that Trump isn't serious about a third term," and I can get rid of that. Trump is treated as a more powerful figure if he isn't perceived as a lame duck who will be gone in 4 years. People may be more willing to compromise or negotiate with him if they believe he's going to be around for a while. It doesn't change so there's usually two different ways somebody's considered a lame duck. One, they lose their, incumbent run. And, from November 1st until the inauguration day, January 21st, they're in a lame duck session. They're on their way out. The other way that this can happen is if it's a second term president and they've kind of lost their power and influence by doing some really boneheaded things or, what have you. Trump could be looking at that if let's say he has a few more bungles. Let's say I don't know, with a great big upcoming budget bill on top of the things that he's done to, properly goat fuck the economy right now, or at least financial markets. It's maybe not the economy yet. Maybe the economy is more resilient than them. So this person put that out there. Somebody said there's the possibility of Trump running as VP with the plan of the president stepping down upon inauguration. It would be weird, but weirder things have happened, right? And then somebody very wisely put in, I don't care if he runs for a third term. Of course they don't, because he's probably corrupt and doesn't like the Constitution. We aren't getting term limits for other officials, so fuck it. Let him serve 3 terms if he can pull it off. Well, if he's going to pull that off, he actually has to violate the Constitution, which I thought was something that a lot of conservatives gave a damn about, but apparently they don't anymore. Keela's here. Good to see you, Keela. Long time no see. So I had to pipe in. So I responded to the one person. I said, well, he can run, but he can't be elected. The 22nd Amendment bars him from being elected, not from running for election. Anyone can tilt at that windmill, and that is an important point. He could attempt to run for a third term. He could seek a party's nomination. The party might even be willing to nominate him, but that doesn't mean he can be elected officially. He's served twice. He's done. And the other person wrote about him he would be VP after his 2 terms and then just step down, kind of Putin style. That actually, if you haven't checked, violates the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment discusses who is eligible to be a vice president, and one of them is they can't both candidates can't be from the same state. That came up in the last election, and the other thing is the person has to be eligible to serve as president, which means they haven't served 2 terms before. So trying that gambit violates the 12th Amendment. So I point this out. No one ineligible for the president can be selected as VP. Doug had written, he had asked somebody, what's the probability in your opinion that Trump would actually run for a third term? Mine is about 0.01%. And I simply asked if he thought that was because statistically Trump stands a good chance of having passed away. I mean, just looking at statistical, the life expectancy of the average American man. Now, Trump does have access to, some of the best healthcare in the world, so he's obviously not in the average category there. But then this person wrote back, I'd written about the violation of the 12th Amendment. I don't believe that to be the case. That was the response I got. So I said, well, it is, and posted a link to constitution.congress.gov that points that out and pointed out. It's also the amendment that disqualifies two individuals from the same state being on the same presidential ballot. Then somebody said, well, he could be Secretary of State, could he not? And I said, possibly, but succession would lead to constitutional issues. So say it passes, say there's an attack or something like that, a variety, normally it goes president, vice president, Speaker of the House, and so on. Let's say enough of those were taken out. He's in line because he's Secretary of State. He might not be eligible because he was a two-term president. They would have to visit that at the time. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that's getting discussed repeatedly is not being discussed particularly well. And in most of the circles that I've seen, it's being discussed truly terribly by conservatives who basically have decided that the Constitution is something that they could wipe their ass with. After lecturing us for all 8 years of Obama about what an anti-constitutional tyrant he was. And now occasionally it's perfectly fine to just, let it rip. So you can tell when people listen to talking heads for all their news. Yeah, and you can kind of tell that with Doug too, because I don't know what Doug's main source of news is, other than huffing his own, fumes. But I find this, it's very discouraging to watch people who would, and I can give an explanation on this, and some people are going to probably be ticked off if I try to essentialize this. But here's what I think it is. If a situation even comparable, even close to this had happened, say Kamala Harris was the president, or say we go back a few years and it's Barack Obama, you hit a bad patch in financial markets and you see money draining out of the economy. There's a tendency for people to want to look to their political leaders and blame them directly for that. In this particular case, we can do that because Trump was directly poking the markets and saying, I'm imposing tariffs on American consumers and firms with these import duties, with these tariffs. There it is. And that threw the markets into corrections and then into downturns, crashes. In other situations, it could have been something like a correction or something like that. And the conservatives would be pointing to like, oh, Kamala or oh, Obama, you somehow managed to get some money out of the markets and we know who you're spending it on. It's about narrative. The idea that a Democrat, if there's money flowing out of the private sector, if a Democrat's in charge, they think that the government is hoovering that money up and then giving it to people that don't deserve it. Your money taken from you and given to that lazy piece of shit down the way. That's the narrative behind it. It's built into that, and a lot of this is projection to try to reinforce that. So when someone like Trump blows a hole in the economy practically directly by issuing these executive orders, issuing these commands for tariffs, these guys are willing to kind of lay back and like, oh, no, hang on. We know he's a skinflint and a cheat and just cheap as shit. And we know he doesn't give a damn about anybody else. There's no way that money lost is being used on anyone who could possibly not deserve it. It just disappeared. That's all you need to know about conservatives. I'm sorry, they're not conservatives anymore. That's all you need to know about American corn-fed fascists. And with that, I'll get out of there. So, Tangelo still showed up? Ugh. Doug isn't saying anything new. He sounds like every other right-winger. Yeah, for the most part. I don't really, other than the fact it's unlike most other right-wingers, it sounds like Doug is capable of understanding what a tariff is. And might completely understand what a tariff is, at least in terms of the fact that it is a tax on consumers, whether it's individuals or firms. It doesn't necessarily indicate a tax directly on consumers because sometimes the cost doesn't get passed down, but they do shrink growth. So if you're a pro-growth, conservative, pro-finance type person, and tariffs are also a great idea, you're stupid. You don't understand what you're talking about because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Now, if you're like Doug, where you're starting to get into this weird kind of like heritage foundation, well, I think people need to save more money. Everybody needs to have a great big piggy bank so they can take care of their own expenses. Nobody ever does any debt spending on their own, and nobody uses credit cards. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, like the economy's not set up that way, pal. It doesn't work that way. It'd be interesting if it made it back that way, but somebody tried to slam tilt the economy so that it does work that way and works that way as fast as possible is probably the result of getting what we're getting now. If you ask me, everything that happened was the result of Trump being stupid and insane, and not a healthy combination of either. Not that there really is a healthy combination of the two. But I think he's working with this notion that what they need to do, for whatever reason, is devalue the dollar so they can shift the United States economy into becoming an export-based economy rather than an import economy. They can flip that deficit around. The screwed up aspect to that is they don't discuss what would happen with the service economy that we've built up and the fact that there's a massive deficit in our favor when it comes to those services, that type of economy. So who knows? Maybe they'll start talking about that. Maybe the press will start asking about that at some point, but I kind of fucking doubt it. They were too busy asking him how he felt about how he won his golf tournament, which I'm sure was in no way rigged. You can't end the stream now. You've just read. Do you want to stop in for a chat, Crafty? I can post. I don't know what time it is there for you, but I think it's late. But I've been on for a little over an hour. I can probably post in the shared link if anybody does want to join in for like one last. Let's see here. There's a join link if anybody would like to jump in, say hi. Of course, you don't have to. If nobody clicks in the next couple of minutes, I'll just get out of here. Oh, it's almost midnight. Yeah, no, then you're not coming in. If anyone else would like to click on it though, and say hi or throw an opinion in, go ahead and jump on in. There's only 20 watching, so an hour, that's like a short. It's a weekday. I got school in the morning, which is to say work. I've been asking that, Red Fang. That is an excellent question. Where's my no tax on tips? I've been wondering that too. Where's my $5,000 fun bucks from Elon Musk? Doge was supposed to be saving us all this money. Where's my $5,000 check? I need that $5,000 check if I want to afford a 13-inch TV, thanks to the 125% tariffs that are in place. Oh, those damn Chinese TVs. I guess I'll just have to get the ones that are manufactured. No, they're all manufactured in China. Shit. You're going to go live and review a one-on-one you had with PMars? I was so drunk for it. Well, you have to be if you're going to have a conversation with PMars. So, all right. All right, folks. Well, with that, I'm going to get out of here. Have a good Thursday night. For some of you, it's creeping into Friday morning. So I'm going to take off and get out of here. I will catch you for the next one. Hopefully, I'll have something a little bit more interesting to stream than just current events and news. But lately, this has been on my mind, and this has been the only thing I've been, kind of like, talking about other than local work stuff, which I don't share on here. So with that, I will see you all later. Have a great night and see you next time.